We're a national charity helping people with convictions find work. The top issue that we see is actually not having opportunities for people with convictions. One of our members applied for 5,000 roles before they were successful.
We're an organisation fighting for a world where systems work for people going through tough times. The number one thing that we see is that lack of control in people's lives. People feel like they have no choice but to return to institutions which offer structure and guidance.
Most women in prison are on sentences for 6 months or less, which is long enough for a woman to lose her job, home and custody of her children. Being in prison has a disproportionate impact on women's mental health and rates of self-harm in prison.
Support When It Matters was set up to provide culturally competent interventions to older black males engaged in the criminal justice system. Quite often there are undiagnosed or unmet mental health needs and also lack of housing accommodation on their release.
We try not to talk about people we serve, but give them real opportunities to speak for themselves. Mr. DC, who was recently released from prison, he would like to ask, why does it take 6 weeks for a newly released prisoner to receive benefits such as universal credit? Can put an added strain on an already stressed low-income family, which can lead to the person resorting to crime.
The top issue that we are facing is bank accounts for ex-offenders. So most of the people that have been placed into custody have lost their property and do not have identification to enable them to open a bank account.
We want to tackle the disproportionate representation of Gypsy Roma travellers in the justice system. People are sort of being sentenced to these short-term custodial sentences and this revolving door just continues and the root causes are never overcome.
Our support is focused more to Devon, specifically HMP Dartmoor, Plymouth and Torquay communities. One of the top issues is release from custody on licence end date. It means that there's no support available, not either from probation, which leaves people in the lurch.
The lack of tailored education which meets an individual's needs, which gives no acknowledgement of a prisoner's previous experience, risk factors or future goals.
Our top 2 priorities for reducing reoffending. One is to encourage employers, as many employers as possible, to open up their vacancies to people with convictions, to reduce reoffending from 1/3 to 1/2. The second priority is to really support people to keep going. They often have hundreds of knockbacks in their search for work.
We have to get better at listening to people who are leaving prison, asking them directly, what are your priorities? Where do you want to go? What are your worries and concerns? The second priority is about choice and control. There is a feeling they don't have a choice about where they go. Anything we can do to put the person at the front and centre of their own lives is a top priority for us.
We know prison doesn't stop reoffending, so it's only right that we invest in what works and instead get sustainable funding for women's centres, which provide an anchor to help stop women being swept up into crime.
Following the David Lammy report on the challenges for BAME prisoners, it is important these recommendations are followed through. Cultural requirements for prisoners, adequate facilities for when people are released.
Alison is a mother and long-term foster carer. Her son, who has suffered with serious mental health issues, is currently serving a prison sentence. She would like to ask you, Lord Chancellor, why are families shut out of the system? Why isn't their expertise recognised and utilised as a way to improve prisoners' mental health?
My 2 main priorities for reducing reoffending are to ensure that everybody is accommodated when they're released from custody, to ensure that everybody has access to funds when they're released.
Our 2 priorities for reducing reoffending: fewer short-term custodial sentences. These people will be better served in the community where meaningful rehabilitation can take place. We need to be making sure that the education people are given is the education they want.
We identified 2 kind of strong priorities: accommodation availability and a higher degree of local council involvement, perhaps pre-release.
1. Building trusted relationships, and 2. Finding sustainable, meaningful employment for prisoners who are released by improving education, working with local communities and empowering individuals.
How are you going to make prisons really rehabilitative, given that the prison population is going to increase?
Why can't families be included in mental health decisions?
How will you create systems that are truly person-led?
Why is there no support for people who've reached licence end date on release? Why do we continue to refer to people within it using very negative labels?
When people are released from extended periods of lockdown in the prisons, what are we doing to ensure that they have support for mental health issues that could arise from being locked up?
In line with the female offender strategy, what is being done to reduce short-term custodial sentences? Is there any increased funding for community programs?
What additional resources are going to be put in place to meet these particular needs for this cohort?
Given the government strategy and the commitment to reducing the number of women in prison, why would we build 500 new prison places for women?
What are your intentions going forward to ensure that released prisoners have sustainable job opportunities?